Hello and welcome to this CUBE conversation. I'm Rob Strechay and we're here gearing up for KubeCon CloudNativeCon North America in Atlanta, the epicenter of what's next in cloud native innovation. We're seeing AI and Kubernetes come together in ways that are reshaping the entire stack and how organizations leverage platform engineering techniques, gain developer productivity, maintain visibility through observability, get security to zero trust, and leverage edge and hybrid cloud to unlock entirely new development models. To help me unpack the goings on and what we're going to see in Atlanta and more and beyond, I'd like to welcome Rob Shaw, who's the Director of Engineering at Red Hat. Welcome on board. And somebody you've probably never seen on theCUBE before, Stu Miniman, who's the Senior Director of Market Insights at Red Hat. Welcome on board, Stu.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
Glad to have you both here. I think that when you start to look at this, I want to take a step back for a second and kind of look at cloud native as an entirety, because I think the fact that Red Hat has been making a lot of investments, not surprisingly, in this space and really bringing together AI and Kubernetes. And seeing we have Rob Shaw, who was with Neural Magic, here. Why don't we start out with you and kind of you help us understand the landscape from a cloud native perspective and how these two things are really coming together with AI and Kubernetes.
Yeah, I mean, as I think about it, we've had basically 3 years now since the launch of ChatGPT. And so there's been a lot of excitement around LLMs and lots of pilots, over the course of the past, 3 years as various different use cases have started to, pop up across businesses and consumer applications. And so where Kubernetes and comes into the picture is we're starting to turn a lot of these pilots into production applications, right? And from what I've seen, almost all of the deployments of LLMs are coming on top of Kubernetes. And so it really sets the picture for what Kubernetes is best at. These long-lived services, these production quality applications, all the reliability, scalability, et cetera, that has been built up for running other applications, LLMs can really fit on top of that overall paradigm. And so we're starting to see lots of different enterprises, startups, et cetera, leveraging Kubernetes to deploy these applications. And so that's where a lot of the excitement has really been, especially as we started to see, reasoning models and agentic applications, which are very, very, very demanding inference workloads. That's what we've spent our time on at Neural Magic and now at Red Hat is hardening that stack, making it as efficient as possible, and starting to look at places where we can tie together inference engines like vLLM with the Kubernetes ecosystem.
So let's kind of explore that a little bit. Why don't you give us an update as a maintainer for vLLM and LLMD? Why don't you kind of give us an update on where those things stand?
Yeah, sure. So vLLM is a piece of software that's really grown up with the open source LLM ecosystem. As I think back over the course of the past 3 years, we've really seen a proliferation of open weight models starting to emerge. The Llama series is a great example of this over the course of the past, 3 years from Meta, from Llama 1 to Llama 2 to Llama 3 to Llama 4. Recently we've seen lots of new entrants into the space, such as DeepSeek. These models need a way to run on hardware accelerators. And so that's what vLLM is all about. It's about mapping that whole ecosystem of open source models onto that whole set of hardware accelerators. So we've collaborated very closely with NVIDIA GPUs, with the NVIDIA team to make these models run really fast on NVIDIA GPUs, with the AMD team to make those models run really fast on top of Instinct, obviously with the TPU team from Google, to map those models onto TPUs, with Intel and the AWS teams as well to, really allow that whole ecosystem of models to run on top of that whole ecosystem of accelerators. And so that's really where vLLM sits. It's that, single kind of ecosystem project where all these different model providers can, map onto all the different hardware accelerators and really provides that integration point for all of these key ecosystem participants. But what we really kind of identified, about a year ago as these models got larger and larger is that there's an opportunity to look at cluster scale in addition to, an individual, kind of pod. vLLM kind of maps to a pod, basically, where, it's going to be deployed on a single node, and it's going to try to make that node give you as many tokens as possible for serving that model. One of the things we identified is there's lots of distributed optimizations. And for LLMs, the first letter is L. They're very large. They're very, very, very compute intensive. So we launched a project called LLMD, which is really a collaboration between Inference Gateway API extension in the upstream Kubernetes ecosystem with vLLM to try to look at distributed optimizations that allow us to get more tokens, out of an entire cluster of vLLM servers.
And it would seem that would tie in very nicely. I mean, again, I went through what the main pillars were for KubeCon, and we'll get to kind of the stuff because I know there's a lot of exciting customers that are going to be on at Commons and other places that we'll dive into in a second. But when you look at LLMD and stuff like that, one of the big things is edge and hybrid. To me, it would seem like LLMD is kind of almost a bridge for that as well, because if you're going to do inference, a lot of people are talking about how they want SLMs at the edge and things of that nature. Is that where LLMD really fits in?
Yeah, I mean, as I think about LLMD, it's really about a variety of different performance optimizations. I think that's a really critical part of LLM serving is these models are running on really, really expensive hardware accelerators. Even small language models are, 8 to 10 billion parameters. They're very, very, very expensive to generate tokens. And as we start looking at more, modern LLM workloads, these can be reasoning workloads where the model is going off and generating tokens for an entire minute, thousands and thousands of tokens per inference request. Or it could be agentic applications where the model is, executing a tool and then the result of that is getting sent back to the model. These are very, 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 very compute intensive workloads. So LLMD really takes the idea of, looking at a whole cluster of vLLMs. To really explain why there's an opportunity to optimize at the cluster level, I think it's important to really compare and contrast the LLM inference workload with a standard, kind of HTTP request.
Right.
The average HTTP request that, Kubernetes is amazing at running is really, really fast. It's uniform. It's super cheap. It's going to take less than a second. Every single replica can process the request about equally well. And so standard things like a load balancer and, a scale out deployment is a really, really good strategy for scaling that deployment, right? Because with round robin, you can just, distribute the workload, and in general, you get an even amount of load. We look at the LLM workload, the LLM inference workload, however, all of those assumptions basically don't apply. For instance, the average inference request can take 60 seconds, 2 minutes. You have a huge heterogeneity of the inference workload that you're running. You could have a RAG workload where, it's thousands of input prompts and really, really short generation. You could have a reasoning workload where you get a short prompt, then you generate for a really, really, really long time. You could have, it's very common to have multi-turn conversations where the requests, if you think about a chatbot use case, you'll go back and forth with the model. The request patterns tend to have this temporal locality where there's opportunities to exploit these properties. And LLMs have a very specific generation phase where there's sort of two phases to inference. There's the prefill where you're processing the prompt, and there's the decode where you're kind of generating the tokens one by one. Yep. These have actually very, very, very different properties where the prefill is what's called compute bound. It's bound by basically how many flops you have in the machines, whereas the decode phase is what's called memory bandwidth bound. It's bound basically by how fast the HBM on the GPUs is. And so there's a really cool optimization, which is that you can specialize, prefill replicas and decode replicas, connect these through, high performance interconnects, and really enable you to kind of specialize the vLLM pods for these types of work. And so LLMD looks at all of these general ideas. How can we better load balance a heterogeneous workload? How can we take advantage of the fact that there's multi-turn request patterns? How can we take advantage of the fact that, the LLM workload has this prefill and decode phase, and maybe we want to actually specialize different replicas for different amounts of work? So all of these ideas are things that we know are being used by frontier model providers to really squeeze more, tokens per dollar out of there, or to squeeze more tokens per node basically out of their instances. And, our goal with LLMD is to take all of these different performance optimizations, compose them into, Kubernetes to make it easy for enterprises and startups to be able to, take advantage of those same optimizations when they're, going to deploy in the familiar environment of Kubernetes that they're used to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually ties in well with, I'm already signed up for Red Hat Commons, but Stu, why don't you kind of help us understand what Red Hat has going on at the show and how it ties in, because I know I know some of the customers already that are going to be on stage. There's a lot of AI going to be talked about.
Sure. Well, Rob, what Rob just talked about, we reached a certain point in this ecosystem where it's like, well, we've got a certain level of maturity. People said sometimes it's a little bit boring. AI is changing a lot of these things. It's a natural extension, but not only are there all the AI pieces, but underneath, there's a lot of changes that need to happen because, as Rob so well pointed out, the workloads are very different, how long they stay, how stateful they are, and everything there. So first of all, at the main show on Tuesday morning, we've got a nice slot. We're talking about trust and security in the era of AI that we have. So a lot of open
Which is
projects.
huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely. In general, people need that, but that's what you're going to get from Red Hat.
Right.
Luckily, extension of a few open source projects that have been around for a year, like Spiffy and Spire, very focused on that space. I know you know that well, Rob.
I know.
And as well as some of the AI things like KServe will also be highlighted in that environment. You mentioned OpenShift Commons. So part of the Day Zero event, it's a little bit, it's not at the main event, it's a little bit further away, but actually near where most of us are staying in the hotel blocks and the like. And OpenShift Commons, of course, is a great place to hear all the customers out there. So we've got financial service, we've got public sector, a variety of geographical backgrounds, and, big names like, Ford, Morgan Stanley, Northrop Grumman, all sharing their environment, as well as there's opportunities if you stay for the afternoon to get hands-on. So we talked about AI, we talked about cloud native, but there's actually like a hands-on environment for looking at like storage and virtualization environment, which of course has been one of the hotter conversations we've been talking about. So lots of areas to be able to learn. And of course, when you come to the show itself, Red Hat's going to be the first booth when you walk in, as well as if you go to the project area, there's a lot of Red Hatters supporting them. So like Rob's one of the key contributors for vLLM. We've got Red Hatters throughout, dozens and dozens of open source projects, which of course is the main thing we're talking about at KubeCon is all the open source projects and all that it has benefited users and what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and to your point, I think that the whole community aspect of it, and when we talk about, this is what our fourth one we're doing of these before KubeCon and CloudNativeCon, and when you start to talk about the hallway track and getting in with people and having these discussions, to your point, I think Commons, that was the great thing for me, being a geek at heart, is being able to talk to the end users actually using stuff, going and saying, hey, this is why I went down the vLLM path, because, I have more than just one type of GPU in my environment, and I need to be able to have some commonality, and this is why I want to work off a common platform, which is why open source is so great.
Yeah, well, Rob, one of the things when you go to this show, it's like, okay, how much time do I spend hanging out the hallway and wandering booths and talking to people? One of the things I love about Commons is most of the sessions, we leave time for Q&A. So you want to talk to all those users and get out, and oh, by the way, if you can't make it, we're going to put them all up on YouTube. At the end of the main stage, we put a bunch of our folks from the Red Hat side up on stage to do AMA. I'll be up there. It's always a question that comes out that, got our lead technical engineers and product managers, but sometimes it's something I can help with. But a really good way to interact with people, and it's a good start to get you as to like, okay, where do I want to spend time at the show and dig deeper in some of these technologies? Because at the main show, a lot of times if you want to speak to the speaker, it's like, okay, they finished. Everybody queues up. Do I actually get to see them and talk to them? So yeah, as you said, community is something we know pretty well at Red Hat, and getting to interact and actually dig a little bit deeper is a great opportunity.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think one of the things that's been exciting is that there has been so much coming together around the Linux Foundation in general and CNCF and some of the other parts of, the Linux Foundation. Rob, from your perspective, how do you see all of this, as you look at AI and open source? I mean, I'm very bullish on it. I have a funny feeling you're very bullish on where it's going. What do you see as like the next 12 months with things like vLLM and LLMD and stuff like that? And you threw another acronym out there with LLVM, which now is going to be stuck in my head forever.
Well, hopefully we'll try to reduce some of the alphabet soup we have going on. But in general, one of the things that I'm most excited about is like the quality of the models themselves continues to just get better and better and better. We've seen huge innovations over the course of the past 3 years. I saw a chart that sort of showed, ChatGPT when it first came out versus like what it's like now. And it's just stunning the amount of progress that, has, happened over just like a very, very short period of time. And, we're seeing that continue through open source models where, the reasoning capabilities that have been added to some of the proprietary models are starting to show up in the open source models. We're seeing really, really large open source models be released that really have that, frontier capability. So that's one thing I'm really excited about is just the continued kind of improvement in the overall quality of those open source models, which is what actually unlocks the business use cases and consumer use cases that is powering all this frenzy. So I think that that's one really, really great trend. And then I think the second thing is, companies and consumers alike and startups alike have been searching for use cases over the course of the past 2 years in earnest. I think a lot of those are going to start getting to scale. Companies are really starting to think through what does their inference platform look like. I've talked to a lot of customers. Many of them are running on proprietary APIs. I'm starting to see lots of companies starting to, however, plan for the future as these open source models get better, as the costs start to rise. And they're really starting to think through, what does my platform look like? What is the kind of foundation of the next 20 years of my private LLM cloud, so to speak, that they'll be, kind of running. And so that's really why I'm so excited about LLMD and vLLM. I really think that these two technologies are going to be really fundamental to what these platforms look like. vLLM is that Rosetta Stone that takes this huge ecosystem of models, that gets better week on week. It takes that huge ecosystem of accelerators that gets better and better generation on generation and maps those together. And, LLMD is the thing that allows that to compose with Kubernetes. And I think those are going to be the foundational projects that, really drive that next layer of platform that's really being built, as we're speaking now. So yeah, I couldn't be more excited about the future. I'm also really excited about the new accelerators that are, entering into the market. It's been, great working with the Google TPU team to bring support into vLLM. We've been working with AMD for a long time. We have some really new, exciting architectures like, the Blackwell NVL72 machines, which have some really cool networking associated with them. So there's certainly lots of new problems for us to work on in vLLM to make sure that we're taking advantage of the amazing innovations going on at the hardware level. But it's just really such a vibrant space, both at the model and the hardware layer, that just makes really, really interesting technical problems in vLLM and LLMD. And, I think it's just really interesting to see, the beginning of these platforms starting to emerge inside of customers. And so it's really those two things together. It's like super exciting technical problems going on, and then, really starting to work with customers who are building their open source model serving stack seriously. Yeah, I just think it's going to be an amazing next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's one of those things that I'm excited because I think what gets me most excited about getting there is, and you kind of hit on it, but, I'm sure that, Red Hat's got more than just Commons going on with a lot of the customers, because I know some of them will be on theCUBE later in the week, which is fantastic. We always love that. I mean, because, it's where the rubber hits the road, or if they're in aviation, or hits the runway, hopefully. When you talk about it, but I think part of it is that Red Hat is going to be going across all those pillars as well. There's security, there's the platform engineering stuff that you're doing, there's all of the different pieces within making observability more accessible, and, with some of your partners and things like that. So what else you got going on?
Yeah, so Rob, there are so many things. I sent you, we actually have a website that lists, like, first of all, even at day zero, there's they renamed Cloud Native Security Con, something that I can't quite remember. There's all the backstage activity, of course, which is platform engineering there. There's some of the AI pieces where we will have additional day zero activity coming on. And then we have way more sessions that we are presenting at than we have time to go in here. So just please, if they just go search like Red Hat KubeCon 2025, you will find a landing page which has everything, including a link back to theCUBE, of course, where we're going to have, I'm always thrilled, Rob.
And we'll put the link in the
couple of customers on there. But yeah, what's interesting, Rob really talked about, so many customers are still trying to sort out, their use cases, as well as a number of customers I talked to that just like, oh, I figured it out, but the economics didn't make sense.
Yes.
And the things that we're working on is underneath, Kubernetes is reliable, secure, scalable, and the like, but some of the additional changes that we're making can really help those economics to get better usage. I love, we had one of our channel partners, I introduced a vLLM, and he called me up the next week. He's like, oh my God, I doubled the amount of LLMs that I could run on my small lab environment. And of course, that just totally changes the economics on, whether that use case is viable and the like. So working through some of the early use cases, and as more customers are going out to much broader scale production, that's really where Kubernetes come in. And there's a lot of work, not just at LLMD, but all the Kubernetes pieces underneath, how do pipelines and GitOps tie into this new world? And, there's dozens of projects there. So we know the CNCF has been great at pulling in a lot of these projects to make sure that they work there, because, the infrastructure and the applications have to play well together in this fast-moving space.
Yeah. And one of the ones you missed was Cloud Native plus Kubernetes AI Day, which, how can we forget that? I mean, rolls off the tongue. And Kubeflow, which another project that's awesome as well. And I think, again, when I look at this, the amount of people that are going to come together in this entire space down there in hot Atlanta, it's going to be a lot of fun.
And Rob, probably not snow this time, unlike the people that went to Salt Lake last year.
Yeah. Walking in to get to get there in the snow was an experience. I'm glad for hot coffee that was across the street from my Airbnb that time. But no, this has been great. I think, again, when you start to look at all of this coming together, all of the AI, there's so many moving pieces, and as you were saying, it moves so fast. And I think, again, with this week being, our friends at NVIDIA having their GTC and everything and ramping into there, it's going to be like a month of AI. I mean, like, the next month is just going to be a lot of fun.
Rob, haven't we been in like 3 years of AI?
I know, but it's still, you get to a point where you're sitting there and you're like, how does it make it, to your points, both your points? I think why I love KubeCon in particular and CloudNativeCon is the fact that a lot of end users are coming there not only with their problems and what they're trying to solve for, but the solutions that they've found that work for specific, that you can get ROI out of your LLM, how you get beyond just a chatbot, you get to more agents that are using traditional AI and analytics and other things with it. So I'm excited for it. I mean, I get jazzed up about it pretty easily. So, but thanks for coming on board. I think this has been great. Any last words or no?
Yeah, it's a big ecosystem out there. If you're going in person, we even have a party that you can sign up with our friends at AWS, because, it is hybrid. It's really interesting. It's been pretty exciting for those of us, especially that have a hardware background. If there were a few years in the cloud era, that's like, does hardware matter more than ever? Does it come on? And at Red Hat, hybrid has been, our drumbeat for more than a decade. And AI inferencing happens a lot of places. Where do I do my training? So hybrid is, definitely the reality, and AI more than ever is putting that in the forefront. So we're super excited out there working with our customers and our partners to help make all these a reality.
And I have a funny feeling we haven't said the word KubeVirt yet today, but I'm sure Red Hat virtualization and KubeVirt.
Virtualization.
Yeah, I know, but that plays into the hybrid thing as well, and edge, and how people are transitioning a lot of their workloads.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rob, the conversations I've had with customers for the last 2 years has been, if I have a problem on my virtualization side of the house, and if that's going to cause budgetary issues, I don't have the bandwidth of my people or the dollars to be able to spend on this AI stuff. And if you don't do that, your competition's going to leave you in the dust.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to leave it. So, Rob, thanks for coming on board. Stu, as always, thanks for coming on board. And thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you all at KubeCon CloudNativeCon North America in Atlanta for 2025 on theCUBE, the leader in tech analysis and news.